welcome to episode number 38 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. My name is Jason Fanelli, and I am the Esports and Gaming Insider for Fox PHL The Gambler, and we have a fantastic episode lined up for you this evening. I sit down and speak with one of the top casters in the area. Her name is Nekkra, also known as Rosemary Kelley. We'll speak to her about her recent work with Pokemon, as well as other things she has in the pipeline. I'm going to talk about a bit of a meme template that's been going around recently about what was actually 20 years ago versus what we think was 20 years ago in video games. Some of them are really upsetting to me, and we'll get into that a little bit. And finally, I'm going to talk about an indie game that I'm playing right now for a review for one of the websites I write for. And man, is it one of the most fascinating games I've ever played. So we'll get into all that. But first, let's not waste any time and jump into the 6 in 60 seconds. Rainbow Six Siege legend Pengu announces his retirement from competitive play at the age of 23, won $375,000 in 5 years in the league with Penta and G2 Esports. Meanwhile, the Atlanta FaZe and Dallas Empire clinched the top seeds in the Call of Duty League's first major of the year. Some early results see the LA Gorillas defeat the LA Thieves in the winners bracket in an upset. Also, We Play Ultimate Fighting League has announced a UFC-style supercard event called Ultimate Weekend Brawl beginning this weekend. Elsewhere, Bloomberg has reported a brand new Nintendo Switch model with a bigger screen and 4K output capabilities is coming this holiday season. Guilty Gear Strive from Arc System Works is being delayed from April 9 to June 11 after feedback received in the recent beta test. And Tonic Games Group, the studio behind Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, has been purchased by Fortnite studio Epic Games. Those are your 6 in 60 seconds. And as always, the 6 in 60 seconds is brought to you by the sponsor of Cheesesteak and Controllers, Ghost Shaver. The Ghost Shaver is a brand new razor designed to feel like an extension of your arm. Its precision cutting system gives you a close and smooth shave every single time with 5 different rotary flex action super thin blades and a patented handheld design that fits into the palm of your hand, giving you a firm and controlled grip every single time. It's easy to use and easy to clean with a quick rinse. It is a shave above the rest. That's ghostshaver.com. Check it out at ghostshaver.com. All right, here we are with our first segment of the day. Right here, this is an interview I am very, very excited about. It's not every day that you hear someone in a presentation, in a big presentation, and then when you look them up, you realize they're in Philly. It's wonderful to hear a Philly voice in a major, major presentation in the gaming industry. And right here I have the voice of the new Pokemon Snap trailer from last Friday's Pokemon Presents. Her name is Rosemary Kelley, but you may know her as Nekkra. Nekkra, how are you?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me. I am just so thrilled to be a part of this.
Absolutely. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, I have to pick this girl's brain. First and foremost, first question I have for you, how cool was that? Have you come down from Cloud9 yet? I imagine you've been playing Pokemon your entire life. So to be involved directly with not only a Pokemon project, but a Pokemon project that people have been asking for decades now. How cool is that?
I cannot begin to describe to you in coherent words how much being a part of the Pokemon Presents means to me. As a longtime player of the Pokemon franchise, I never expected that I would get a chance to be a part of bringing the news of all of these new games to fans and fellow players and trainers everywhere. So it's a dream come true, and I think I should just leave it at that.
So let's talk about how you got there, a little bit of the background on you and how your voiceover career started. Where I thought you were born and bred in Philly, and I'm not going to hold this against you, you actually have informed me that you moved here specifically to start your esports career. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually was born and raised in Florida, or I guess not born there. I was born in South Korea, and I was adopted, and then I grew up in Florida. Long story there. I've been in all over the country, but I decided that I wanted to settle down in Philadelphia because it hits a lot of different points for me in terms of an esports career that I wanted to have. You're very close to some of the major cities that like to hold esports events, like New York, Boston, Washington, D.C., very, very close in gesture there. And then also Philadelphia has its own esports scene. And that was something that really attracted me to Philadelphia because I have a lot of family in the area, but it was really just like the work that Nerd Street Gamers is doing and all of the other aspects of being in Philadelphia that really made me just want to call this place home.
I love that, and we are happy to have you. That arena they're building down in South Philly is probably a big selling point there. I don't know about you, but I want to move there. I want to live in that arena full time. I can't wait for that thing to open. Speaking of that arena and the name on the marquee, you have done some work with the Fusion in your time in Philly, doing the Path to Pro stuff. You mentioned the Doomfist 1v1 when we were talking beforehand. What's it like working behind the scenes with a team like that, having that being the voice of a team for whatever type of event it may be?
Oh my gosh, working with the Fusion is also such a dream come true. Every player that I've interacted with is so incredibly nice. The staff are wonderful, and there's just something really special about being able to connect with a Philadelphia team, right? Like, I love being able to connect with the fans as well. Philadelphia fans, they're like nothing else, and I am living for it.
That's a very nice way to put it. They're like nothing else. We appreciate your candor and your applied honesty, let's call it. So let me talk a little bit also. So because you've done work with Overwatch, you've done work for casting work for Pokemon, you've done some Pokemon World Championship work before that went down for the pandemic. How do you approach different types of games to cast? Because casting an Overwatch match is completely different, I would imagine, than casting a Pokemon match because of how fast Overwatch is versus Pokemon and the strategies involved and the fact that they're shooters versus RPG style combat. What do you do to prepare for each of these games, and how do you adjust for each
So
game?
I can actually tell you about a show that I'm preparing for coming up this weekend.
Oh, yeah, let's
just
go.
kind of the thought process that goes through my head when looking at preparation for an event like that. So I'm actually going to be involved in the Teamfight Tactics Fates regional finals through Riot Games. And I'm going to be hosting it. And so it's a little bit of a different role than actually casting the game. So if you're a caster, it's much like a sports commentator where you're watching a football game and you hear about the announcers that are talking about the action happening in the game. That's basically what I do when I'm casting, except for video games. Hosting is a little bit different because you don't necessarily have to have a boots on the ground knowledge of the game nearly as much as what a caster does, but you still have to have enough knowledge that you can flow through the conversation and direct the conversation in a way that viewers can really understand what's going on in the game. So what I do for preparation in situations like this is I study. I play the game, I watch a lot of the game, and I talk about the game to as many people as I can, because that's ultimately how you're going to find the knowledge necessary in order to be in a position like that.
And there's definitely a difference between someone who is casting or hosting a game that they have no idea what they're talking about and someone who is boots on the ground, knee deep in the experience like you just described. So that research is huge, and I commend you for it. I imagine that takes a lot of time.
Yes.
Because would you say you spend more time playing the game to prepare for it or actually casting it?
I spend much more time off camera, behind the scenes, preparing for a show than I do actually spending time on the show itself. So that, for me, in the week leading up to the Teamfight Tactics Fates regional finals that are going to be happening March, I want to say 6th and 7th and 13th and 14th, It is a lot more about preparing for the show. So I'm spending maybe 8 to 10 hours a day focusing on preparation for this particular event.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a full-time job.
It is a full-time job, and you get to play video games for your full-time job. I'm sure you hear
Yes,
that a
I
lot.
do.
You just play video games all day? Yes, and I love it. Thank you. So I guess a big elephant in the room for anybody that I talk to in esports and video games is this pandemic. I can imagine that your your workload, or not your productivity, but your workload, the opportunities that were available to you have been severely, hopefully not too severely, impacted by this. So what have you done, or how has it affected you this past year or so, and what are you doing to just keep yourself active?
That's a great question. I think that one of the things about esports that I like is that it's particularly resilient. And even with the pandemic, we've just made an online shift. So a lot of the esports shows that you hear about, especially pre-pandemic, are all in-person or what we call LAN events. And that just means that you're all playing on the same internet network and you're all the same building. You have this big crowd, lots of noise, lots of energy, and it's really, really fun to feed off of. But when you're in an online environment, you don't have that necessarily, same type of energy, same type of feeling. Like you do have maybe Twitch chat and people that are interacting that way, but it's not the same as being able to do it in person. So that's kind of been the biggest difference for me, is having to shift from all of this energy in person and excitement and then trying to find a way to make the show just as exciting when you're sitting at your computer desk at home.
Do you have a pet?
I have two. I have a cat and a dog.
Do you cast to your pets? Like, are you doing all this hype stuff and looking at them and hoping that they react to you, or you're just kind of like, they don't want anything to do with this? All right.
Oh, no.
Not
they
quite the
couldn't
same, right?
care less about what I do in my office.
That's awesome. That's a weird question, too. I'm very sorry. So I want to go back real quick to host versus caster. Which do you prefer? Do you prefer the hosting duties, or do you prefer the play-by-play casting duties? Do you have a preference?
It's weird because I fit a bunch of different roles in the esports industry. I've tried a lot of different things. This is going to be one of the first times I'm actually desk hosting.
Oh,
so
cool.
I can't really tell you which one I prefer yet because I haven't really gotten a chance to feel out all of the different roles. But, I've tried color casting. I do color casting for Overwatch. I do play-by-play casting for Pokemon. And then, sideline reporting for games that I might be less familiar with, but I really like the game and I really understand the player base. And now desk hosting is going to be another role that I get to add. So they're all very different. And, that means that there's things I really like about them over maybe the other positions, and it's just kind of fun to be able to fit all these different roles.
It is cool that you're dipping your finger into all the different types of things that you can do in a broadcasting situation. Would you think that maybe somewhere in the future you would settle into one, like you would try them all, figure out the one you like the most, and then just stick to that, or are you always going to be whatever you got for me, I'll do it?
I think I'm always going to be the type of person that if you bring me a job and I feel confident in giving you a good performance for it, then I'm going to take the job.
That's awesome.
I love esports. I love gaming. And one of the things that I really appreciate about being in an on-camera role is that I get to share that love and passion with the people that I'm broadcasting with and the people that are watching at home.
Yeah, and something about esports and competitive gaming in general, and maybe this is just because I'm biased, I've been playing games my whole life, you're probably going to agree with me on this. It's just different. It's just better. The way that casters get more hype and things happening in real time. I guess when you're watching a regular sport, quote unquote, those commentators are trained to be neutral. You can get excited about what's happening in the game, but you can't really get excited about like the players or things like that. Here, esports, I feel like you have a little more flexibility there, especially if you know what's going on. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. One of the biggest things that we like to craft during our productions is storylines. Storylines are so important to us and so influential to how we broadcast, and it means talking about the players. It means having that historical knowledge that you can share with people that are watching the broadcast from home, or if you are in LAN, then at the stadium itself. But it is an important part of the broadcast, and we wouldn't be the same without it.
That's true. I agree. And speaking of your vast knowledge, I want to get one more Pokemon question in before we get off this interview. Legends Arceus. Biggest announcement from last week, probably threw us all through a loop. What if you, as a fan now, not as a professional, this is just you, the Pokemon fan, what do you want from that? because there's a lot of people giving a lot of ideas. So I'd like to hear what you, who've been playing Pokemon your whole life, are looking for in Legends Arceus.
So I remember actually getting a chance to get a bit of a preview.
Cool.
When I was doing the voiceover, and gosh, the animation blew me away.
Yes,
I don't know how
agree.
else to put it, but for Pokemon Legends Arceus specifically, I think you can consider it a game that's like Breath of the Wild meets Pokemon, and it's just like so exciting that there's so much potential there to have a beautiful RPG, open world platform, and so many different elements that I feel like that are really going to excite the player base. Like, as a fan, as a player, as a trainer, I'm so pumped to see what this is going to offer for the game. We're getting lore. This is pre what we know as a Sinnoh region.
Background lore. It's amazing.
Yeah, this is background lore at its finest. So for this game, I'm so excited, and I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither. As soon as I saw that, I got the same Breath of the Wild vibes, got a little bit of Xenoblade 2 in there as well. Very, very much looking forward to that. One final quick one before we get out of here. Favorite Pokemon?
Oh, Sylveon.
Sylveon!
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That is not one I hear often. I should. But you either hear, the common Pikachu, or you hear someone just trying to be different with a weird, obscure, like Tropius or something like that.
I'd love to meet a person that finds Tropius their favorite Pokemon.
I went through a phase like that, and then I realized, no, Houndoom's a lot cooler, so let's go with Houndoom.
Nice choice.
Yeah, since Gold and Silver, Houndoom's been my guy. But Nekkra, Rosemary, thank you so much for coming onto the show today to talk Pokemon and other things. Your work is fantastic, and we look forward to more of it. Other than Teamfight Tactics this weekend, where can they find you? Hit your socials, any other jobs you have coming up, let us know.
So you can find me on Twitter at Nekkra Gaming. You can also find me on Instagram at Nekkra. And hopefully that's also what my handle will be on Twitter at some point.
Hopefully soon.
But thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about things that I love.
And I just want to clarify one thing for the listeners. That is Nekkra, Nekkra. They might put a C in there. Just want to make sure it's Nekkra Gaming when you're searching for her on Twitter or Instagram. Nekkra. Thank you again so very much for your time. Looking forward for everything that you do. You're doing Philly proud in your esports career, and we wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Moving right along here in the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, just want to give another shout out to Nekkra for that excellent interview. Very much appreciate her time and her thoughts. I'm looking forward to everything she has going on in the future. Would do an on tap here, but is a relatively light week in terms of games coming out. The only real big ones to talk about are Apex Legends, finally coming to the Nintendo Switch, and Stronghold Warlords, a real-time tactics strategy game hitting PC. But besides that, not a whole lot going on, so we can just move right on to the second topic of the evening. Now, if you're on social media as much as I am, which is admittedly a whole lot, you would see these memes float around this week having to do with what people think was 20 years ago versus what was actually 20 years ago. And it really made me think about just how much time has passed in the gaming industry. So, for example, one of the pictures that was floating around, and the one that really got my thoughts going on this topic, was what people think Nintendo was 20 years ago. And it's a picture of the NES, the original Nintendo, versus what Nintendo actually was 20 years ago, and that's the GameCube. The GameCube came out while I was in high school, which, as hard as it is for me to believe, was approaching, I'm approaching having graduated 20 years ago. In fact, the fall of 2021, so this coming fall will be 20 years since I started high school. 20 years since my first day of high school, freshman year. That is a mind-boggling thing to wrap my head around, but it is the truth. And the fact that the original Nintendo was almost 40 years ago now, and not 20 years ago, really got me going and thinking about what else would really surprise people as it pertains to what was 20 years ago versus what actually was 20 years ago. And the PlayStation is another good example of that. Now, some people think 20 years ago, they think PS1 we're still playing, Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9, and it's close, but believe it or not, the PS2 was out in 2001. We were already playing PS2 in 2001. I believe that was the year before like Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts had come out, so we were still talking about the Metal Gear Solid 2 was still fresh, and things like that. Final Fantasy is another one. People think that Final Fantasy 20 years ago was, Final Fantasy 4 or Final Fantasy 5, or Final Fantasy 6, excuse me, the Super Nintendo Final Fantasies that are considered huge classics. But no, 20 years ago was Final Fantasy 10. I know it's hard to believe. Final Fantasy 10 was already 20 years ago. I remember seeing that game for the first time in, of all places, the back room of of one of those card shops, like collectible card shops, back when I was playing like Pokemon cards and the Dragon Ball Z card game from Score, throwback to anyone who has ever played that before. And I remember watching just someone go through a couple of battles in Final Fantasy X. They had it in the back while nobody was in the store, and they let me watch them play, and I was absolutely floored by what I was seeing. I could not fathom the game I was seeing at that particular moment, having just come from Final Fantasies 8 and 9. Seeing Final Fantasy in this PS2 setting was absolutely mind-boggling. And then to think 20 years have passed since that feeling. I remember that feeling. I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was 20 dang years ago. Another perfect example is Mega Man. Now, when I say Mega Man, the elders among us are going to think of classic NES Mega Man 2, 3, 4, 6, or whatever ones you played. Not quite Super Nintendo. We think Mega Man, we go straight back to the NES days. But by this time, 20 years ago, we were looking at Battle Network. Right? Battle Network was already being played 20 years ago. Now, that one doesn't really hold as much water for me, only because I didn't play the Battle Network games. I kind of missed that part of the Mega Man arc. I stopped at X, so I played the classics. I played Mega Man X, and then I was done with Mega Man for a while. But 20 years ago, we're talking Battle Network, the grid-based Game Boy Advance Mega Man games. So any fans of Mega Man are now wondering what the heck's going on there. Let's talk about Pokemon 20 years ago. You think Pokemon just celebrated its 25th anniversary. So back in 2001 was probably the original Pokemon games, right? But I think in this case, it's not as bad. I think we were only in Pokemon Gold and Silver in 2001. But the third movie was hitting theaters. And so we were firmly in the Gold and Silver era. So that's not too bad. My favorite era of Pokemon Gold and Silver. Really, really like those games. And other franchises, Kirby is another one, but unlike the funny thing about Kirby is people think like the Game Boy game or the NES game in this situation, but we're actually talking about things like Kirby Superstar and a little further out, Kirby on the Game Boy Advance, which was basically the exact same game, just updated a little bit for the Game Boy Advance. So that one's a little funny. Sonic the Hedgehog is another one. Sonic the Hedgehog blew my mind when I realized what was going on with Sonic the Hedgehog. 20 years ago, if someone says to me Sonic 20 years ago, and I close my eyes, I'm thinking of Sonic 2. I'm thinking of Sonic and Knuckles, which are one of my favorite games that I happen to own on the Sega Genesis. The original side-scrolling, speeding Sonic the Hedgehog is where my head goes when I think 20 years ago in Sonic the Hedgehog. turns out 20 years ago is knee-deep in the Dreamcast era. So we're talking Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic Adventure 2 was 20 years ago or somewhere around there. And it was definitely far removed from the old Genesis era that I'm thinking of. Yes, Sonic Adventure 2, the debut of Shadow the Hedgehog, who feels like he's been around forever. 20 years ago. And my point with this is, as we talk about more, another great example that I'm looking at right here. What I'm trying to get at here is these classic games age a whole lot faster than you realize. Okay, here we go. So my grander point in this is gaming anniversaries and trying to talk about the games that you won't believe are as old as they are, but they are, right? So already in 2021, we have had major anniversaries for the following games. Mass Effect 2 feels like it came out yesterday or even earlier today. 10 years old. Legendary Edition coming out in May. 10 years old that game is. Duke Nukem 3D, classic PC game in the Doom vein of first-person shooter. Duke Nukem 3D, 25 years old on January 29th. That's unheard of. I can't believe it. Street Fighter 2 celebrated 30 years in February the 6th. The Legend of Zelda, the original Legend of Zelda on the original Nintendo NES, the first Zelda game ever made, 35 years old on February the 21st. Feels like yesterday. 25 years old. Or 35 years old. Pokemon, 25th anniversary, as we mentioned earlier. Zelda Oracle of Ages and Seasons on the Game Boy Color, one of the most underrated Zelda games ever made. 20 years old. Civilization 2 for you PC fans, 25 years old. And now in March, we're 4 days into March, and we're about to celebrate some big ones in the coming week. We've got Conker's Bad Fur Day, the underrated, very raunchy platformer for N64, is 20 years old. Super Mario RPG, one of my favorite Super Nintendo games of all time, is 25 years old. The first Pro Evolution Soccer is 20 years old on March 15th. Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, everyone talks about how Skyrim was on everything. Skyrim will be 10 years old in November, but Oblivion will be, 15 years old on March the 20th. And this list just goes on and on and on. Resident Evil turns 25 at the end of March. Pokemon Stadium 2 turns 20 at the end of March. Black and White and Neverwinter Nights, two classic PC titles, 20 and 30 respectively. And I could keep going. That's just the first 3 months of the year. This is an absolutely mammoth year for gaming anniversaries and the games that we hold dear, celebrating these crazy birthdays, even though they feel like they just came out yesterday. Childhood, nostalgia, time is a hell of a thing. And it's awesome for me to go back and relive these games. And it all started with a meme. It started with a silly, silly meme about what people think is actually happening 20 years ago, but what actually was 20 years ago. And honestly, it's making me want to go back and play these old games again. Like I want to go check out Super Mario on the Super Nintendo, Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo, when I think that the first one was 20 years ago, the first one on Super Nintendo, but actually the Game Boy Advance one is turning 21 this year. Is turning 20 this year. I want to go back and play all these older games. I want to relive them again in all their glory. And this meme made it that way. Of course, there are a couple of funny ones. There's one that says what people think RuneScape was 20 years ago versus what RuneScape actually is. Actually was 20 years ago, and it's the exact same picture because RuneScape never changes. That one's funny. But I'm thinking of going through this list, finding all the games that have major anniversaries, major birthdays, and just playing as many as I can get through. in the year 2021, just to remember all of those old games. I could stay on this list all day, but we have other things to do. I would recommend you check this out. It's a website called Teechu, teechu.com, and you search for 2021 video game anniversaries and birthdays, and just go through this list. I guarantee, with how insane this list is, you will find multiple games that were part of your childhood in any month. At least one. I would say at least one in every month of the year. There will be a crazy birthday. Just for one highlight, let's go to August. August has things like Golden Sun for the Game Boy Advance turning 20, to Metroid for the original Nintendo turning 35. The Super Nintendo in the U.S. is turning 30 this year. That means Super Mario World and F-Zero are 30 in the U.S. For the more recent gamers, Devil May Cry is 20 this year. Tekken 2 on the PlayStation 1 is 25 years old. That is a foundational game in my life, and it's already 25 years old. I need to stop. I'm just making myself feel ancient as I talk about this more. But yeah, so check out this list. Find some games that you haven't played in a long time and dig them out for that game's birthday. Whether you want to plan the short term and look at March and April, or if you want to plan out for the rest of the year and take a look at August and the holiday season. The holiday season anniversaries are insane because the holiday season releases are insane. So check it out. Highly recommend it. See what games anniversaries blow you away the farthest. And I guarantee you all it will do is lead to you having a hell of a time playing some old classic games for a long time. All right, now we're getting into the final topic of the evening. And this is a segment that I don't run very often here on Cheesesteaks and Controllers, but it's one that I want to do tonight because I'm playing a game right now. Indie title by a smaller company called Playism. It was a game that originally came out for the Vita in 2012, PlayStation's handheld, the Vita, and didn't really see the light of day in America, only stayed in Japan, and is now being re-released in English for the Switch. Came out on Thursday the 4th, so the day that I'm recording this is when it launched. And I just want to make sure that this game gets a lot of time in the spotlight because it is one of the most fascinating games I have ever played. So, introducing for perhaps the first time on this podcast, could be the second, I have to go back and look at my records. Let's go to a segment I like to call Indie-licious. And that's because this indie game is absolutely delicious. Now, the game I am talking about is called Gnosia. It is spelled Gnosia. So if you've heard of games like Among Us or Werewolf, where you have a bunch of people in a room and they're telling you different things and you have to guess which one is the insidious one and vote them out, that's what this game is in its main gameplay. So there could be up to 15 people in a session, including you, and anywhere between 1 and 6 of these insidious beings called Gnosia, the name of the game, titular name. These Gnosia are trying to eradicate the human race, and nobody knows why. So all 15 of these people are stuck on this spaceship. It takes place about 1,000 years from now. And the game is broken down into 15-minute, let's say, maybe 10 to 15-minute loops. So you start a session, you start with a discussion phase, you vote on who's getting put into what they call cold sleep, basically just removed from that game. You have a little bit of a time to talk to pick one of the random characters. You talk to them on the ship. You can also level up your stats, so your ability to speak is better, enhanced throughout the game. And then you find out if you didn't get rid of all of the bad people, all of the Gnosia, another random person is killed. So every round you lose 2 people. And if you're starting at 15, that means you're down to 13, down to 11, down to 9, so on and so forth. Until either all of the Gnosia are wiped out, or all of the humans are wiped out, and the Gnosia win. Or, I'm sorry, there are as many Gnosia left as is half or more than half of the people left. So if there are 7 people left and 4 Gnosia, the Gnosia win. If there are all the Gnosia are voted out, then the humans win. And there are other different things that different win stipulations that can occur. Like there's one character who gets a job called the Bug, where all they have to do is get to a winning scenario without having been eliminated, and they automatically win. And then there are jobs like Doctor, who can tell you what someone who was voted out is, like after they've been voted out, basically if you got it right or not. You have engineers who can study one person per loop or per session and tell you if they are bad or not. But the Gnosia can claim those jobs too. So you could have two doctors. One is a Gnosia and one's not. And you have to figure out who's lying. Just another layer to put on top of it. So, like I said, so the main gameplay loop is about 15 minutes. It's sessions of 5 questions where the group debates back and forth for 5 questions. Or 5 topics, and then you vote, and then that person is put into sleep, the other person is killed, and then it starts all over again. It sounds like it could get boring because it's short, and it loops over and over again, so you're continually doing this same style of gameplay with similar dialogue, and in fact, some of the dialogue never changes. You'll be reading the same things over and over and over again in every session. The monotony is real. I will preface you with this. If you're thinking about trying this, the monotony is 100% real. But this is the first game I have ever played in my life that uses that monotony to its advantage. Because the overall purpose of this game is to gather little story bits throughout different scenarios. So say in one scenario, you have to have it where it's 10 players, 3 Gnosia, and you have to have a certain job. Now that sounds like it would be impossible and trial and error would take you forever. Luckily, after so many loops, the game gives you scenarios where you can find an event and then you can just start that event. It's called the event tracker. So you just hit or event search, excuse me. You just hit the button. It gives you a scenario on the screen that will lead to an event, and then you try and get that event. It's not like you're just mindlessly picking options, crossing your fingers and hoping. The game does hold your hand a little bit there, which I appreciate, because the amount of permutations you would go through with so many people and so many jobs and so many Gnosia, so many werewolves, would be insane. But in using the monotony, in getting you into a monotonous groove where you're going through debates and you're voting and you're talking to one person after every voting session and you're going over and over and over again, when something happens, when you get to one of those story beats, when something different occurs, you're immediately locked in. And you lap up every piece of information in that story mode. And that is the brilliance of Gnosia. That right there is why I would recommend every single person who is listening to this try this game. You expect the game to be monotonous, and sometimes it gets monotonous to a fault. Sometimes it's so heavy on the same dialogue and same actions over and over again that you want to quit playing. Luckily, the game is structured in a way where after a loop is over, it takes you back to that menu screen where you change the parameters, and that's a good place to stop. So if you're only in the mood for 1 or 2 loops, you do 1 or 2 loops. If you want to sit through a 15-20 loop marathon, you could do that too. There is no finite number of loops. You just keep playing until you unlock all of the little story bits, and that takes you to the true ending. Now, what are these story bits? Are they interesting? And the answer is a resounding yes in some cases. There were some that honestly had me confused. Like I thought I missed something. I thought I had skipped something, when in reality this is what I was supposed to see. For example, there is 2 characters that if they are assigned a job called guard duty, where basically if a character reveals themselves to be guard duty, then they are definitely 100% not bad. They're humans. Because guards don't leave the ship in the storyline. Guards don't leave the ship, and only people who left the ship are potentially contaminated. So it's like you can pick 2 people out of the lineup immediately. So the way that this ending goes, or this story beat goes, if 2 certain people are assigned guard duty together, The story that you unlock is that one of them goes crazy and murders everyone. Yeah. For no reason. It's not really explained why this happens. It just happens. But it's one of the story beats that you have to collect in order to get the true ending. Every character has weird stuff like this happening. One has what looks like tattoos all over her body, but you come to realize that they are something much different. I'm not going to get into what they are for spoiler reasons, but suffice it to say, whatever you're thinking, it's not that. It's a roller coaster of a game. One of the coolest and strangest games I've ever played, right down to the character design as well. Some of these characters are your typical like anime fare. Let's say you have the girls with the longer hair and like in the space suits. You have the spacefaring anime girl. You have the robot-esque, like not maid, not escort. There's a word I'm looking for. But it definitely fits that stereotype. Her name is Stella. What the heck is the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it right now. But if you saw it, you understand. There's the cowboy dude who's a little quirky. There's one character who at first I thought was holding a cat. And then I came to realize that no, that cat is surgically attached to this person. And you learn something about why that is that will make your head spin. It's just everything about this game is inherently interesting despite it being filled with such monotony. And that juxtaposition, those two puzzle pieces not fitting together is fascinating. I need to know what happens at the end of this game. I'm half tempted to play a couple of loops while I'm finishing these sentences with you right now. That's how much I want to get back into this game. Every other game that I've been playing right now is on pause. I'm not going back to it until I finish this game. Yes, I know Smash Brothers' next character, Pyra and Mythra, dropped at some point tonight while I'm recording this. Yes, I know Bravely Default 2 is a massive RPG that I need to get working on. Yes, I know that Fortnite is still Fortnite and my friends are still playing it and they want me to play it. No. Until I am finished with Gnosia and I get all these story beats, everything else is off the table. Do I hope it's in time for Fortnite Season 6 on March 16th? Yes. Do I think it will be? Sure. I'm on loop 80. I think 81. And based on what I was reading from the Vita version, the Japanese-only Vita version, it takes people about 100 to 150 loops to get everything. So, in a good sense, I'm about 20 away. In a bad sense, I might still only be halfway there. But either way, I'm going to play them. I'm going to play the crap out of them. And I hope it creeps me out. I hope it makes me laugh. I hope it makes me sad. I hope it makes me feel everything. Because so far, this story is dynamite. And it's a game that I really... The first trailer just kind of made me intrigued. But after now playing it, it's a fascinating piece of work that I will now recommend to anyone as a smash hit on the Nintendo Switch that may fly under some radars. So, do yourself a favor. If you are the owner of a Nintendo Switch, pick up Gnosia on the eShop. It's digital only. You can't buy it physically. Pick it up. I don't think it's that expensive. I think at the most you're going to be paying maybe $20. I have to look at the price. I'll bring the price up as I'm talking right now. But give it a shot. Take a look at it. See, get through, 15, 20 loops. Give it that long. And see if it's something that you're interested in. If it's not, then, well, it's not. There's nothing wrong with that. But I guarantee you'll see enough of the story that you'll be like, okay, I think I want to give this a shot. And you will. It'll be a game that you play. It'll be a game that you end up loving. And it'll be a game that'll stick with you for a very, very long time. Just like it did with me. I expect to be thinking about this game for the very long future. $24.99 is what we're looking at on the Switch eShop. So, not a bank breaker by any means. Gives you a dozen hours of gameplay. As long as you can get through the monotonous elements, knowing in the back of your head that the monotony will be paid off, which is not something that many other games can say. It's I can't recommend it enough. So I'm hoping that it ends. I hope that its ending is as good as its beginning and middle. Obviously, I can't guarantee that until I finish it. But right now, man, whoo, is it really impressing me? So pick up Gnosia, take a look at it. I guarantee you, at the end of it, you will be wondering why you hadn't heard of this game back when it came out on the Vita. Granted, it was Japan only, but why you hadn't even heard of it in like a news article or anything back in 2012 when it first launched. So, Gnosia, playism, thank you for bringing this to the States, because my gaming experience is highly improved for being able to play it. And with that, we are at the end of episode 38 of the Cheesesteaks and Controllers podcast, presented by Fox PHL The Gambler, 102.5 FM, 1480 AM, and iHeartRadio. I am Jason Fanelli, and I am the esports and gaming insider for the radio station, bringing you the latest and greatest in the industry that we love so dear. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will be back again next week to bring you more of the greatness. Have fun playing. Talk to you soon.